Without giving everything away, let me say my next guest is taking an interesting approach to counter the labor shortage in restaurants. The National Restaurant Association recently said that 4 in 5 restaurants are totally understaffed. I spoke earlier with Mike Bell, the CEO of Miso Robotics, to discuss one of my favorite topics and obsessions, robots.
Mike, thanks so much for joining us today. Look, I'm obsessed with robots. I find them fascinating. A lot of people look at them as machines that have promise. A lot of them look at them as the villains of the future. Tell us what you're doing with the Flippy. If I don't even know how to call it. Is it the Flippy robot, Flippy 1, Flippy 2? Tell us what problem you're solving.
Yeah, thank you. Flippy likes to be called Flippy. And we're solving an important problem, and the timing kind of couldn't be better when this problem has become acute. It used to be referred to in the restaurant industry as the labor shortage, and this predated the pandemic, Steve. It's now being called the labor crisis.
Well, there was a labor shortage in restaurants before COVID came. I mean, it's very important to put that on the table. You were fixing a problem before the tsunami of this giant job gap happened.
Indeed. Before this pandemic, it was called kind of, the labor challenge, and there was roughly, I call it 800,000, open positions that were just perennially open. High turnover, low job satisfaction. It was kind of this labor problem. The pandemic hit, and all types of factors kind of accelerated and kind of got us where we are today. And it's now considered the #1 problem for essentially every restaurant chain in the industry. They can't find positions in some cases to even open and operate a restaurant. They don't even have like minimum staffing. And so,
because and as we mentioned earlier, didn't mean to interrupt, but from the National Restaurant Association, just take restaurants, they're saying 4 out of 5 establishments have a labor shortage. I'm not trying to bandwagon here, but I'm saying the gap is real. So tell us how Miso Robotics is filling that gap. And I guess my unfair question to you is, can you fill the need?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question, important question, and not enough and not soon enough is the candid answer. We can kind of come back to that, the supply chain challenges and everything that's kind of affecting us. But the problem is an important one because it's when you look at back of house, particularly in QSRs, quick serve restaurants, there's just a whole bunch of tasks that are monotonous, repetitive, sometimes dangerous. Human beings don't like to do these things. And standing over a vat or several vats of hot oil and moving a basket left or right, there's simply better places to put a human body, like working with human beings, doing things that are more related to upkeeping the technology. And so we provide this awesome solution where it's a robotic station that goes in over an existing fry station. It's got a robotic arm, and it simply does all that monotonous work for the human being. And so the human being is then freed up to go do other tasks in the restaurant, all that help drive customer satisfaction, employee happiness, usually actually drive sales and increase the service. So it's a net win across the board.
So you're in White Castle restaurants, and I think it's called Caliburger. I haven't been out to LA in a while. I know you're in Manhattan Beach, but what are the establishments where someone could glimpse Flippy?
Yeah, the list is growing. We also made an announcement in addition to those 2 chains that we're partnering with Buffalo Wild Wings. And Steve, we're talking to many or most of all the large brands that provide fried food to their customers. Typically, what happens is these brands will bring in Flippy and they'll do a pilot, maybe in an innovation center or maybe in a corporate location. We'll test it for a while, and then they'll typically come to Miso for a rollout, and that's when we come public with their name. A lot of times they just prefer to kind of go through that phase. So this quarter, we're in pilot with a dozen or more leading brands, and there's more and more lined up. The problem is just much bigger than we can solve this year. I mentioned earlier that there was 800,000 open positions in the restaurant industry before the pandemic. There's something like 1.5, 1.6 today. So these are positions, and there's 500,000 restaurants in the U.S. alone, not even talking international. Wow. And so it's this gargantuan, market and this acute need converging right at a time when Flippy is becoming ready for commercial scale.
So I don't want to ask a silly, vapid question, but I'm going to anyway. It's going to be kind of silly, maybe, but I spent a lot of time in Japan, and I have seen robots in department stores. Some convenience stores actually have personal shoppers that go around and buy, and they're cute. They have kind of faces, and they're cute. And so part of selling robots is the aesthetic for people when they do it. Are you worrying about Flippy's looks?
No, it's actually a really good question. It's important. What we we witness that all the time. So Flippy he's headless, and so don't judge him, but it's basically an arm that kind of comes and flips burgers or moves fry baskets. When you witness people like watch Flippy for the first time, it's very mesmerizing. And the reason is there's humanoid-like movements, and to see that, in person for the first time, everyone is kind of a little bit, mesmerized by it because it's pretty cool to see. Flippy moves in a way that people refer to as like, it's a little bit like a Cirque du Soleil thing, the way that he kind of twists and contorts and moves around. And it's very humanoid. And I think that works to our advantage. When we put Flippy in a restaurant, he becomes talked about and thought of as just a fellow employee. And matter of fact, he's sometimes a favorite employee because he's doing the job no one else wants to do. And so people are pretty happy to have him. They even rate him for employee reviews. They even give him awards and kind of name him. And so all of this kind of humanoid tendency has got, I think, a
part of softening the introduction. People want to, kind of create that sort of soft and fuzzy version that's a worker too. But let me, it's kind of a broader question, and I don't, this is our first encounter, and I'm really happy that we've met. But I've been interested in robotics for a long time, and my understanding is that the U.S. robotics industry is not as vibrant as it could be. That at one point Google bought a lot of what was going on in robotics around the country, and that might, according to one person I interviewed, said that might not have been the healthiest thing for the U.S. robotics sector. So what is the health of the U.S. robotics sector now, say compared to Japan or India or China?
Yeah, it's taken off in some really in some pockets within the overall economy. Logistics and manufacturing is where you see kind of the highest install base and kind of the most adoption of robots. And so, in addition to Google, Amazon is a monster user and at this point a developer of robotic solutions. And there's a lot of the same kind of pick, pack, and ship that goes on that the robots are taking over logistics centers. Also manufacturing, that's been kind of going on for a while. And also, if you think about it, self-driving cars, those are essentially robotic solutions. They use computer vision, artificial intelligence. So it's kind of also its own little pocket of automation as well. For where we're at, it's rare. There's just not, it's a really big industry in the restaurant industry, but there's very few companies looking to automate the way that Miso is.
One of the other things that I know this is the wrong way to think about robotics, but I like to run on a treadmill in a gym when I'm not having to wear a mask. But I like to run, and I see how much servicing this equipment, needs. Peloton needs servicing, right, to stay up to standard. I'm interested when you're dealing with a high volume, complex machine. Is there a point at which, so what is the servicing dimensions of it in short form? Or is there a point where, the Flippy begins flipping like crazy because there's been no technician?
Yeah.
Is that a fair question? I just imagining the dystopian side of wild Flippy.
You've done so much good reporting on labor, Steve, and kind of the labor impact. This is a good little illustration of kind of the answer to your question. We've had to create we spawned a whole job from scratch, and it's robot support specialists. And these are people that are, they're not software engineers, they're not robotic engineers, but they're robot technicians. Now, today, this force does not exist in the country or on planet Earth. And so at least technicians that can serve the type of robots that we provide. And so we're hiring a fleet of people that have a little bit of a technical background and also good trainers and kind of just good with overall equipment to go out and service these things because it doesn't exist. And so people all the time look at us and talk about, well, isn't that a job taker? And on a net basis, it absolutely is not. But even on the contrary, the whole new economy of industrial jobs is being spawned while we're talking about it.
It's really, really interesting to think about our future and the automated dimensions of it, because I do think there's a question about, the fear of displacement out there. And I think I've done a little research and you're kind of looking at, okay, how do you move people out of unsafe positions with, cooking oil and, moving into other areas. But just be interested, I know this is unfair, but you are the CEO and you have to communicate to your investors what your vision is. What comes after flipping burgers and flipping wings and flipping fries? What, as you kind of look at the next dimensions of application of robotics in an area, say the U.S. service industry, what's on your radar?
We're staying super focused on the restaurant industry because when you look back of house, man, it is greenfield. There's such low-hanging fruit for tasks that can be automated. And so the way we approach it, Steve, we say, okay, what is the biggest task that we can take over with automation that has the biggest impact? There are a lot of examples like, can you make a robot create guacamole? Well, we can, but it's hard and expensive, and you may not love it, and it's kind of cumbersome. But when you look at a back of house restaurant, for example, drinks, when people are waiting in drive-through or they're waiting for their food, they're usually waiting for French fries or they're waiting for drinks. And so we're automating the drink station. So when you order, a large Diet Coke, the machine hears it, automatically puts the right amount of ice in it, spits it out, labels it, and hands it to the human being versus the human being standing there pushing you to do it, a couple hundred times a shift. So we're looking at kind of just progressing through the restaurant industry, tackling tasks, kind of the meatiest one at a time. Forgive the pun.
Well, look, we're out of time, which is unfortunate because I could talk about this for a long time. I'm going to call you when I'm in Los Angeles next time and go see one of the flippies at one of the many establishments you're in now. But Mike Bell, CEO of Miso Robotics, congratulations. Thanks so much for taking us into the future here.
Thank you for having me, Steve. Appreciate it.